Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're conducting a forensic autopsy of a massive technology and project management failure. And look, this isn't just some dusty history lesson, right? It's a direct mirror reflecting the exact governance failures we are seeing in enterprise tech contracts right now. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going back to 2008. The BBC made a totally reasonable decision. They wanted to digitize their old tape-based broadcast production systems. The goal was a transformative digital asset management platform called the Digital Media Initiative, or DMI for short. But instead, well, it became an absolute masterclass in how oversight can completely, spectacularly fail.
I want to immediately hit you with this number because the sheer scale of it is just staggering. £98.4 million. By May 2013, which was 5 years into the project, the BBC had literally burned through £98.4 million of their £133.5 million approved budget. I mean, when you spend that kind of capital, you expect a functioning system, right? You expect a complete transformation. But when BBC Director General Tony Hall abruptly terminated the program in 2013, the reality of what they actually got for all that money was genuinely shocking.
Absolutely zero. Zero usable system was delivered. After 5 years and nearly £100 million, BBC news teams, sports teams, regional centers, they were all still using the exact same physical legacy tape systems that DMI was supposed to replace. Not a single journalist, not a single producer got a functional tool out of this whole shebang. It was a complete £100 million capital write-off. So, the obvious question here is, how on earth do you spend that much time and money without anyone noticing that nothing is actually being built?
Well, if you look at the paperwork, the BBC seemed to be doing everything right. They had what looked like a perfect conventional governance framework. They hired an experienced enterprise IT vendor, Siemens. They established program boards. They had milestone reviews in place. Management sign-offs were strictly required at every single stage, and regular status reports were constantly being sent up to the BBC Trust, their highest governing body. By every conventional measure of project management, this was a heavily protected technology transformation. On paper, the bureaucracy was firing on all cylinders.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the illusion of progress was created. It actually came down to a fatal flaw in the contract's language. The BBC's contract with Siemens included standard milestone-based payment triggers, but the definitions of these milestones were fundamentally broken. You see, the BBC paid out based on technical completions. That means the system worked in the vendor's highly controlled, pristine demo setup. But a demo is absolutely not operational performance. A system that looks fantastic in a glossy vendor presentation is not the same system that holds up when a BBC News journalist is frantically trying to pull archival footage under intense live broadcast deadline pressure. And the kicker? The contract never required proof of the latter before releasing the funds.
And this leads us directly to the oversight chain itself. Walk through these steps with me. Step 1. The vendor self-reports their progress. Step 2. BBC management reviews that report. Step 3. The BBC Trust provides oversight based on management's review. Do you see what's glaringly missing here? There is no independent verification step anywhere in this entire chain. None. The organization with the absolute strongest financial incentive to report that everything was going beautifully, the vendor, was the primary source of all progress information. Management took their word for it, and the trust took management's word for it.
Let's look at the hard data on this. According to the National Audit Office, this was the financial reality of the DMI. Out of a £133.5 million budget, a massive $98.4 million was spent, yielding exactly zero usable value. And to be clear, this wasn't a system that partially worked or just had a few bugs or worked for some departments but not others. It was an utter void. The National Audit Office literally had to begin a forensic investigation to figure out how this spending continued for years while yielding absolutely nothing. And what they uncovered? It's a terrifying cautionary tale for any project manager.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because it reveals a critical turning point that really accelerated this failure. In 2011, 3 years into the contract, Siemens sold its IT services division to Atos, a French enterprise IT firm. So the DMI contract transferred to Atos. Now, on paper, sure, that's just a vendor name change. But in reality, the specific team of engineers who had been building the platform, the people who actually understood the BBC's incredibly complex operational requirements, they were displaced. The contract transferred smoothly, but the institutional knowledge walked right out the door.
According to the National Audit Office's 2014 report, BBC management failed entirely to independently evaluate the delivery risk created by this massive vendor transition. They kind of just assumed that the legal contract terms would protect them and that swapping in a brand new vendor team wouldn't materially affect the actual delivery capability. Honestly, this is a massive governance failure.
When a complex technology program undergoes a major vendor transition, that is a critical risk event. It requires an immediate, independent reevaluation of delivery confidence. Instead, the new team just kept spending and the BBC just kept paying.
When we systematically unpack the National Audit Office's January 2014 report, the forensic evidence of compounding errors is just staggering. First, deliverables were never tested in operational conditions. Second, there was absolutely zero independent technical review of the vendor's claims at key decision points. Third, when warning signals did flash, they were constantly brushed off and labeled as recoverable by management. And incredibly, the BBC delayed conducting a formal independent program review until late 2012. By that point, the vast majority of the budget had already been set on fire.
Actually, I really want to focus on that recoverable myth for a second. For over 2 years, there were massive warning signals flashing bright red. We're talking missed interim milestones, the vendor was asking for continuous timeline extensions, internal user testing was failing miserably. But every single time these red flags popped up, management simply characterized them in their reports as recoverable. And because there was no independent validation, that recoverable label was accepted at face value and passed right up the governance chain. It's like everything is fine, right up until it suddenly isn't.
And this brilliantly illustrates the devastating result of that flawed chain. It's captured perfectly in the BBC Trust's own October 2013 report. They stated bluntly, and I quote, "The Trust was not given an accurate picture of the programme's progress by BBC management. For 2 whole years, the highest governing body of the BBC was looking at management reports filled with optimistic green light updates, completely blind to the reality that the programme was fundamentally failing. They had all the standard governance activity for sure, but absolutely zero governance accuracy."
So what does this all mean? Well, the BBC Trust report hit the nail on the head regarding the root cause, expertise asymmetry. The BBC's internal technology functions simply lack the sufficient in-house expertise in large-scale digital asset management systems to independently evaluate what Siemens and Atos were actually doing. When the vendor said, hey, the milestone is met, the BBC didn't have the technical chops to look under the hood and say, actually no, it's just a demo, it doesn't work in our environment. That expertise asymmetry is the silent killer. It's what allowed the illusion of progress to persist for 5 long years.
So, the crucial point is that this exact same scenario is playing out right now in modern project management. The BBC's failure isn't just some wild anecdote from 2013, it is a direct parallel to the enterprise AI platform procurements happening today. Look at this comparison. On one side, we had the BBC versus Siemens dealing with a massive expertise gap in digital asset management. On the other side today, we have your organization versus an AI vendor dealing with an expertise gap in AI model integration. If you've recently signed an AI vendor contract, this case applies directly and urgently to you.
Think about standard AI contract milestones today. You pay when the model is trained, when the API is deployed, or when the dashboard is activated. Guess what? These are the exact same technical completions that trap the BBC. Sure, they sound great on a status report, but they are not evidence that the system works in your real-world operational environment. Does that trained model actually parse your messy legacy data without hallucinating? Can your actual users rely on it under pressure? If you are only measuring technical completions, you are basically paying for operational theater, not operational performance.
The bottom line is this. Governance frameworks only work if the information flowing through them is independently verified. And that is absolutely crucial in fields where expertise asymmetry is the highest, like AI. The BBC's milestones were paid, the system didn't work, and the lesson cost them £98.4 million. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Before your next AI contract renewal, look at your milestones and ask yourself, how will you independently verify that this milestone has genuinely been met in your operational environment, and not just in the vendor's perfectly controlled demo? Are you willing to ask that question now, or will you learn the answer at a similar cost?